Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark. I'm thrilled you're here. Today we're going to boost your English listening and speaking skills by diving into a brand new 10-chapter detective story. Over the next few videos, we'll explore Chapter 1, Late Night Alarm. Chapter 2, The Harper Legacy. All the way through to Chapter 10, Truth and Aftermath. This simple but gripping tale will help you practice real-world English in context, build your confidence, and speak more fluently than ever before. Let's get started and ignite your English journey. Chapter 1, Late Night Alarm. It was 2:45 a.m. when my phone shrieked to life on the bedside table. The red digits on the clock glowed against the darkness. 2:45. My heart lurched. I rolled out of bed, mind foggy with sleep, and snatched up the receiver. Detective Maya Cole, I rasped, voice thick from drowsiness. Detective, it's Sergeant Reed, came the low reply. I'm at the Harper estate on Beacon Hill. Oliver Harper is dead. Beacon Hill. In mid-December, Boston's cobblestone streets would be buried under fresh snow. I threw aside the covers and swung my legs over the mattress. My uniform lay folded on the chair, navy blazer, crisp white shirt, trousers. I pulled them on without hesitation, the chill of reality fast waking me fully. I slid into my boots and clipped on my badge. Outside my window, the wind rattled old sash frames. Grant me 10 minutes, I told Reed. Understood, he answered. Please hurry, detective. I grabbed my leather coat and scarf, tucked my pistol in its holster, and dashed downstairs. The lobby of the precinct was deserted except for the night desk sergeant, who gave me a sympathetic nod as I passed. My car sat idling in the lot, headlights cutting through the swirling snow. I climbed in and steeled myself, hands gripping the wheel as I pulled onto Charles Street. Beacon Hill. At this hour was ghostly quiet. Street lamps cast haloed pools of yellow light onto drifts of snow crusted over with ice. One wrong move and tires would spin helplessly. I navigated the narrow lane, recalling Oliver Harper's story. Son of a humble electronics shop owner, educated abroad, celebrated on magazine covers for his tech innovations and extravagant lifestyle. He'd sold the family shops and partnered with Victor Wells to open Harbor Light, the city's most exclusive restaurant. Everyone knew his name. Few resented his lavish success. My mind raced as I turned onto Cranberry Lane and stopped at the wrought iron gate of Harper Manor. High stone walls rose either side, topped with black iron spikes. Beyond them, the mansion's turrets and gables were outlined in frost. I killed the engine and stepped into the biting wind. Sergeant, Reed met me at the front door. He looked sleep-deprived, dark circles under his eyes, but stood at attention. "Detective," he said tersely, then led me inside. The grand foyer was silent except for our footsteps echoing on marble floors. On a mahogany side table, a silver tray held untouched whiskey and 2 glasses. I noted the air smelled faintly of cedar and leather. Reed guided me through double doors into the study. The scene stopped me cold. Blood spatter stained rich crimson on wallpaper the shade of aged wine. Books lay scattered on the oriental rug. The heavy oak desk was upended, its drawers gaping. Near the shattered window, a dark stain spread across the floorboards. I moved closer. That was blood, too. Oliver's, most likely. I crouched beside the body. Harper lay face down, arms splayed, a single pillow beneath his head stained crimson. At one corner, his once immaculate suit was rumpled, and the gold cufflinks he always wore glinted in the lamplight. His neck was twisted at a gruesome angle. My stomach churned. Death, I knew instantly, had not been peaceful. "Locked from the inside," Reed murmured, pointing to the window latch. No sign of forced entry on the front door. I stood and scanned the room. The window was ajar, frost along its sill. Through it, I glimpsed the snow-covered courtyard below, about 15 feet down, too far for an accidental fall. I inhaled, deeply. "Reed," I said, voice calm but urgent. "Cordon this room. I want the forensics team here immediately. Collect any fabric fragments, especially around the latch and sill, and check the grounds for footprints." He nodded, already reaching for his radio. I took one last lingering look at Oliver Harper's still form. Somewhere between the lavish parties and boardroom triumphs, someone had crossed a line. And now, in this silent study, I would begin the hunt for answers. Stepping back, I flicked on my torch and called out, "Let's get to work." Chapter 2. The Harper Legacy. I left the Harper study with a heavy heart, boots crunching on the snow-strewn marble floor. Outside, the polar wind bit through my coat, carrying with it the faint echo of the city's first church bells. Beacon Hill had long been a symbol of old money pedigree, granite manses perched atop winding lanes. But the Harpers were a new breed of aristocracy, technology royalty. To understand who Oliver was, I needed to trace how he came to wield so much influence. Charles Harper was a self-made man. In the early 1980s, he opened a small electronics repair shop on Washington Street. I pictured the younger Charles poring over circuit boards under flickering fluorescence, calling in parts from New York. Word spread quickly. He was meticulous, honest, and fair. Within 10 years, he had enough capital to open 5 more shops, then dozens, each boasting a neon sign that read, Harper's Tech. By the mid-90s, Harper's was a household name across New England. Oliver entered the family business as an only child under his father's exacting eye. I imagined ballroom seminars and lecture halls, Charles insisting his son master the fundamentals before tinkering with fancy gadgets. Instead, Oliver rebelled. He wanted to attend boarding school in Zurich, where tuition cost more than a shop's annual rent. Charles agreed, hoping the structure would steer his son toward discipline. At age 16, Oliver was sent off, carrying little more than a suitcase and his restless ambition. Switzerland changed him. He discovered winter sports, avant-garde architecture, and the idea that luxury and technology could intertwine. He studied engineering at ETH Zurich, then accepted a transfer to MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There, he launched his first startup, a Wi-Fi thermostat that adjusted home temperature based on room occupancy. The venture attracted seed funding from Silicon Valley investors and made Oliver a millionaire before he turned 25. Paragraphs in the business journals raved about the boy genius. Photographers caught him at Cannes film festivals and rooftop parties in downtown Manhattan. I remembered flicking through magazine spreads, Oliver laughing on a yacht with pop stars, toasting champagne with Hollywood actors. He had a talent, not only for prototypes, but for self-promotion. When his father passed away 6 years ago, Oliver returned to Boston a different man. He sold the remaining Harper's Tech stores, more than 60 outlets, and donated a considerable portion to charity. The city buzzed with speculation. What would he do next? That's when Victor Wells re-entered the picture. Victor and Oliver had met at Concord Academy in Massachusetts, bonding over late-night coding sessions and iced lattes. Victor's background was more traditional. A son of a decorated Army officer, he'd enlisted in the U.S. Army after college, serving 2 tours overseas. His stoic demeanor and uncanny discipline complemented Oliver's flair. Together, they co-founded Harbor Light, an upscale restaurant on Charlotte Square that promised fine dining fused with cutting-edge ambiance, touchscreen wine lists, sensory lighting calibrated to each course, and robot servers for dessert. The concept was an instant success. Social media influencers posted neon glow selfies beside the bar, and venture capitalists reserved tables for investor dinners. On any given night, you could spot CEOs from Fortune 500 firms, award-winning directors, and the occasional politician slipping through the discreet back entrance. Reviews praised the truffle-infused lobster bisque and the immersive culinary experience that played a curated light and sound show as you ate. Yet behind the glamour, I sensed tension. Oliver provided the capital and the celebrity connections. Victor managed operations and menu development. Their 50-50 partnership sounded equitable on paper, but in practice it can breed resentment. Whispers in the industry suggested Victor felt underpaid. Oliver's high-rolling lifestyle outpaced Victor's modest salary. I filed those details away, knowing any fracture in their business relationship could become motive. As I drove from Beacon Hill back to the station, the magnitude of Oliver's legacy pressed on me. He was more than a murder victim. He was a symbol of rapid wealth, of transformation from working-class roots to tech fame. The question loomed, who among those envious of his success or betrayed by their bargain with him had drawn the fatal line? I parked under the flickering lamp of the precinct lot, adjusted my scarf, and prepared to dive deeper into the web of loyalty, ambition, and jealousy that defined the Harper legacy. Chapter 3. First Impressions. I stepped back into the Harper study just as the forensics team arrived, boots clicking on the hardwood floor beneath their protective shoe covers. The pale glow of evidence lamps painted everything in sterile white, tracing the pattern of crimson droplets that splashed across the burgundy wallpaper. I let the others work as I surveyed every detail, forming the first impressions that would guide my investigation. Oliver Harper's body lay near the window, but the most telling signs were elsewhere. The oak desk, once a symbol of his power, had been shoved against the far wall, its drawers hanging open, papers scattered in disorder. On the desk side rug, I spotted a single footprint in the fine dust of snow tracked inside, a size 10 boot, the tread pattern crisp with angular blocks. Whoever arrived had come prepared for Boston's winter chill. My gaze shifted to the window. It was cracked open about 3 inches, frost glinting along its sill. In the latch mechanism, a tiny thread of dark velvet caught between metal teeth, too well formed to be a fluke. This would link someone to the scene. I noted its position in my mind, fabric stuck on the interior edge, suggesting forceful manipulation from inside or out. Sergeant Reed approached, holding a small bag. "We found this in the hallway," he said, offering it to me. Inside lay a discarded silver cufflink, identical to the pair Oliver always wore. The stone center was scuffed, as if caught on something during a struggle. I slipped it into an evidence pouch. "Good work," I told him. "We'll need his wife and her brother in the drawing room in 5 minutes. Let's start gathering statements." 20 minutes later, I stood in the Harper drawing room, a quiet space of pale walnut paneling, upholstered sofas, and a roaring gas fireplace. Emma Harper sat on one cushion, shoulders hunched beneath a cashmere shawl. Her red gold hair was pinned back, and her eyes were swollen from tears. Beside her, Marcus Stone, her younger brother, rested his hand on her knee, face tight with concern. I introduced myself. Mrs. Harper, Mr. Stone, thank you for cooperating. I'm Detective Maya Cole. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask some questions about last night. Emma nodded, voice trembling. Yes, anything to help. Mrs. Harper, you say you were asleep in your bedroom when you discovered the study locked. What time did you last see Oliver? I asked. Emma glanced at Marcus before answering. I went to bed around 10:15. Oliver said he had some late emails to send. I heard him in the study until about 11. Everything seemed normal. Did you hear any raised voices or unusual sounds after that? I pressed gently. She shook her head. No. The house is always quiet at night. I woke at 2:30 for water and noticed the door to the hallway was ajar. I walked out and saw the study door closed. I tried the knob. It wouldn't turn. It was locked. From the inside. I made a note. Locked from the inside, yet the window was open. Suspicious. Mr. Stone, you arrived later. What brought you here? Marcus cleared his throat. Emma called me at 2:35. She sounded panicked. I came straight over and saw she couldn't open the door. I fetched the spare key from my car and unlocked it. That's when I found Oliver. His voice cracked, but he forced it through. I ran to get help. Thank you. Did you notice anything out of place in the hallway? Footprints? Scratches on the walls? I asked. He frowned, thinking. I remember a scuff on the carpet runner. It looked like someone had dragged something heavy. But the walls, no. I filed that detail away. Mrs. Harper, can you think of anyone who might have reason to harm Oliver? Anyone upset with him recently? Emma's gaze dropped. Oliver was my world. I can't imagine who... Her voice broke, so I let the silence hang to give her space. After a moment, she continued softly. Well, the restaurant partner, Victor Wells, has been stressed about profits, and Oliver's brother-in-law, David Stone, she hesitated at Marcus's name, has had money problems. I exchanged a glance with Marcus, who shifted uncomfortably. David Stone? I repeated. Your husband's brother? No, Emma corrected, tears in her eyes. My brother, Marcus. He invested in Oliver's startup years ago. I thought it was safe. Marcus, you said you had talks with Oliver about finances? Marcus swallowed hard. I asked for some help. Yes, but we settled it weeks ago. I would never... His voice trailed off. I closed my notebook. Thank you both. Please remain available. We may need follow-up questions. For now, I'll continue examining the scene and reviewing forensics. Sergeant Reed will check your home security footage and phone records. As I left the drawing room, I felt the first threads of the case weaving together. A locked door, an open window, a torn velvet, tensions over money. In those quiet moments, my first impressions began to crystallize. Oliver Harper hadn't simply fallen victim to an accident or a random intruder. This was personal, and I would find out exactly who had crossed the line. Chapter 4. Emma and Marcus. I returned to the Harper drawing room just after dawn, the gray light filtering through heavy drapes. The scent of cold ash lingered in the fireplace, and an untouched tray of coffee and pastries sat on the side table, still, warm, likely set out by the housekeeper before everything went awry. Emma Harper and her brother Marcus Stone remained seated on the same pale gray sofa, their expressions a blend of fatigue and guarded resolve. "Thank you both for waiting," I began, settling into an armchair opposite them. I steepled my fingers and gave them a moment to meet my gaze. "I want to understand more about your relationship with Oliver. Emma, let's start with you. Tell me about your marriage, its beginnings and its challenges." Emma drew a shaky breath. "Oliver and I met at a charity gala 5 years ago. He was charming, warm laugh, generous spirit." She swiped a tear from her cheek. "We married a year later. For a while it felt perfect. But after the restaurant opened, he became consumed by work. Long hours, late nights. I traveled to London for a film role last summer, hoping some space would help us reconnect. But by the time I returned, the distance between us felt too wide." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "When did you first notice a change?" "About 8 months ago," she replied, voice soft but steady. Oliver was distant. Our conversations turned to business metrics instead of family. I confided in Marcus, my own brother, because I trusted him. She glanced at Marcus, who offered her a quick, supportive nod. "Marcus, you invested in Oliver's tech startup years ago," I said. "How did that arrangement work out for you?" He took a breath. "Oliver's first venture was a thermostat app. I put in $50,000 hoping it would grow. At first it did. Returns were good. But when he sold the stores and shifted focus to the restaurant, he said the money needed to be reinvested. I understood. It was his life's work. He promised to reimburse me once Harbor Light turned a profit." "And did he?" I pressed gently. Marcus's jaw tightened. "He did, but only partially. I received $20,000 back last March. Since then, I've been trying to make ends meet on the rest. My used car business, well, it struggled. I approached Oliver again 2 weeks ago, but he said his cash flow was tied up in new restaurant. Renovations. Emma's eyes widened. Marcus, I didn't realize you were still in the red. He sighed. I didn't want to burden you. I leaned forward. Marcus, during our initial interview, you mentioned a carpet scuff in the hallway and a velvet fragment at the window. You also arrived just minutes after Emma discovered the locked study door. Can you account for your own movements that night? Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair. I got home from a late meeting at 11:15 p.m., just north of the Common. I changed into sweats and went for a walk to clear my head. I have the coffee shop CCTV showing me passing by at 11:45. I returned around midnight, found Emma frantic, and did what any brother would. Got the spare key. I made a note. And Emma, you last saw Oliver alive at around 11 p.m., working. On emails? She nodded. He kissed me goodnight at 11 sharp. I went straight to bed. Emma, I asked, you were in the master suite. Do you have any home surveillance? Hallway or exterior cameras? She shook her head. No cameras, detective. Oliver insisted on privacy. He said cameras felt intrusive. She paused, then added quietly, he did install a smart doorbell last month. It records video when movement is detected, but I never saw any alerts until this morning. I tapped my pen. Has Sergeant Reed retrieved that footage? Emma bit her lip. He's on it. I expect a download any minute. I nodded. Good. That will help establish if anyone approached the house outside your and Marcus's movements. Now, regarding Victor Wells, Oliver's partner, do you believe he might hold any resentment? Emma looked uneasy. Victor and Oliver argued about profit shares last week, but they patched things up. At least that's what I thought. Victor is proud. He wouldn't ask Emma for money. Marcus interjected, voice tight. Detective, Victor has every reason to resent Oliver. He put in the work, but Oliver controlled the purse strings. I absorbed this. Thank you. One final question each. Emma, was there anyone else close? To Oliver, friends, staff, investors, who might have felt slighted? Marcus, is there anything you've withheld that you now think important? Emma closed her eyes, then opened them resolutely. One of Oliver's interns, Grace Nguyen, was very devoted. She was upset when Oliver suddenly hired a new team last month. She felt dismissed. She sighed. I don't know if she could harm him, but she was distraught. Marcus looked down. After a moment, he sighed. Detective, I haven't told you about the late-night calls last week. I saw Oliver pacing on video call. He looked frantic. I didn't know who he was speaking to, but the tone was angry. I sat back, heart ticking, frantic calls, a frustrated business partner, an intern feeling betrayed, and a brother still waiting on his funds. The web grew more tangled. I thanked Emma and Marcus, letting them know Reed would update them once we had key footage. As they left the room, I stood alone by the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. In the soft dawn, I let the details settle. A marriage strained by ambition, a brother desperate for repayment, hidden calls in the dead of night. These first impressions of Emma and Marcus would guide the next steps. Someone here held a grudge deep enough to kill, and I intended to uncover exactly who. Chapter 5. Victor Wells. I arrived at Harbor Light just after lunchtime, the winter sun slanting through the frosted windows of the elegant Charlotte Square facade. The buzzy hum of conversation drifted out the open doorway, well-dressed patrons leaning into candlelit tables, servers in crisp uniforms gliding between courses. I took a steadying breath and stepped inside. The hostess nodded as I passed. "Detective Cole?" she asked softly, checking her log. "Mr. Wells is waiting in the private dining room." I followed her down a short hallway lined with framed magazine covers featuring Oliver and Victor celebrating their success. At the end, heavy mahogany doors bore the Harbor Light crest. Inside, Victor Wells stood behind a polished table, straight-backed and composed. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no tie, and his close-cropped hair was just beginning to silver. His posture spoke of military training, disciplined, alert. "Detective Cole," he greeted, extending a firm hand. "I'm sorry for the circumstances. I shook his hand, noting the calluses at his fingertips. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Wells. Please have a seat." He sat, folding his hands on the table. A single white orchid in a narrow vase rested between us. The table held no papers or devices. Victor clearly expected a verbal exchange. I settled into the chair opposite him and opened my notebook. "Victor," I began, "you and Oliver Harper co-owned Harbor Light. Can you walk me through your partnership? How it started and how it evolved?" He nodded. "Oliver and I met during our first year at Concord Academy. He was already tinkering with gadgets. I was more interested in team sports and structure. After graduation, he went to Switzerland for university, and I enlisted in the Army. We kept in touch, late-night calls, holiday visits. 6 years ago, when his tech ventures peaked, Oliver approached me about creating a dining establishment that combined innovation with atmosphere. I'd just returned from my second tour overseas and was looking for a new challenge. I wrote, "School friends, business partner, Oliver initiates, Victor manages operations." "And the financial arrangement?" I asked. 50-50, he said without hesitation. He provided the capital. I handled hiring, menu development, logistics. We agreed on profit splits quarterly. Trust was implicit. Oliver trusted my judgment. I trusted his resources. I tapped my pen. Did that arrangement ever come under strain? Victor's expression flickered. We had our disagreements. Last month, I requested a larger share of reinvested profits to fund a second location. Oliver wasn't ready. He cited cash flow tied to his next software rollout. We argued yes, but we resolved it. I withdrew the request. Resolved how? I leaned forward. He exhaled. Over dinner at the chef's table. He apologized for being short with me. I accepted his explanation. He was under pressure. I thought that was the end of it. I studied him. Where were you last night? Victor sat back. I closed the kitchen at 11 p.m. I stayed behind to oversee inventory until 11:45. My sous chef, Jasmine Patel, can confirm. I left then and went straight home. Your home is in the South End? I asked. Yes. I arrived by taxi around midnight. I can provide the receipt. Good. Did you see or speak with Oliver after 11? He shook his head. No. I tried to reach him at 11:30 to discuss the next week's menu, but got no answer. I assumed he was working late in the study. I made a note. Unanswered call at 11:30. Assumed Oliver still in study. Victor, did you ever feel underpaid or taken advantage of in this partnership? I asked. His jaw tightened. Detective, I won't pretend this has been charity work, but I value this restaurant as my legacy. I've invested heart and soul. If I felt exploited, I would have walked away rather than continue at a loss. My loyalty to the brand, and to Oliver as a friend, runs deeper than any paycheck. I gestured to the orchid. This place draws the city's elite. It's not just a restaurant. It's a showcase of your combined reputations. That must carry its own pressure. Victor's gaze softened as he glanced around the room. Pressure, yes, but also pride. I would never sabotage what Oliver and I built. Our success is entwined. I paused, weighing his words against the evidence. The untied profit dispute, his military background and agility, skills that could explain the broken latch and the footprints. Yet Jasmine Patel's testimony and the taxi receipt were solid. Alibis. I closed my notebook. Thank you, Victor. I may need to follow up once I review Jasmine's statement and the taxi records. In the meantime, please remain available. He stood, offering his hand again. Of course. If I can help clear any doubt, I will. I shook his hand, noticing the firmness lingered a moment longer than necessary. Outside the private room, I exhaled and looked down at my notes. Victor Wells had motive to press Oliver on money, but his alibi and demeanor suggested he valued more than just his share. Still, in a case like this, no one was above scrutiny. As I walked back through the restaurant's warm glow into the cold courtyard, I knew the Harper legacy was entwined with ambition, and that any one of its architects could harbor a lethal grudge. Chapter 6. A Friend's Tip. Late that afternoon, back at the station, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen read, "Sam Carter, incoming." Sam was an investigative reporter I'd met during a bribery probe last year. He had sources in every corner of the city, sometimes too many, but always accurate. "Detective Cole," I answered, leaning against my desk. "Hey, Maya," Sam's voice crackled, gravelly with urgency. "I've been digging into Marcus Stone's finances. Like you asked, you'll want to hear this." I clicked open his text message, a bank statement summary, time-stamped 2 days ago. It showed Marcus's used car business had defaulted on a $180,000 loan 2 months prior. The bank issued a demand for repayment by the end of the month, only 5 days away. "Thanks, Sam," I said. "That's big. Anything else?" "Yeah," he replied. "Remember when I mentioned Marcus had an assault charge years ago? I found the victim, Neil Gordon. He's in a halfway house in Dorchester. He's willing to talk, but he's scared. He says Marcus and 2 friends beat him so badly he spent 3 months in the hospital. He wouldn't go to the police at the time because he feared retaliation." A harsh reality settled in my chest. Marcus had motive beyond unpaid loans. He had a temper. "Can you get me his statement on record? I'll send a car for him." "Already arranged," Sam said. "He'll be at the Logan desk in an hour." Also, I tapped some street corner CCTV from the alley behind the Harper house. There's a size 10 boot print that matches Marcus's style of sneakers. I frowned, recalling the footprint in the study. "Good work. Send me the clips." He agreed, hanging up. I forwarded Sam's texts and the CCTV link to Sergeant Reed. "Reed, have Neil Gordon's testimony transcribed. Also, cross-check that boot tread with the one in the study. Then, get us Marcus's car GPS logs for last night." He nodded, already on his tablet. "On it, Detective." I rubbed my temples. The pieces were falling into place. The torn velvet. From the window latch, Marcus's financial desperation, his history of violence, and now video evidence of him pacing outside the Harper house around midnight, just before Emma's call. I pulled up the security footage from the station's archive, grainy black and white frames of Beacon Hill's narrow alley. There, At 11:50 p.m., a tall figure in a dark hooded coat paced past a motion sensor light. His sneakers left faint, angular imprints in the freshly fallen snow. The tread pattern matched the footprint found near the desk. "Read," I said, pointing. At the screen. "That's our guy." Reed froze the frame. "Confirmed. Size 10, same pattern. He's definitely here." I exhaled. "We need Neil Gordon's number now. Get him here before he changes his mind. Then pick up Marcus's car logs and phone records. I want to know who he called last night." As Reed moved to arrange the tasks, I retreated to my office corner to reflect. Marcus Stone had more than one reason to resent Oliver Harper. Unpaid debts, a humiliating business failure, and an old score hidden in hospital records. If he'd been outside the house at midnight, he could have forced the window latch, slipped in, and delivered the fatal blow. His brotherly facade and tearful concern in the drawing room were nothing but camouflage. An hour later, Neil Gordon sat in an interview room staring at me with haunted eyes. His leg was in a brace and he flinched at every shove of the chair. "You called me," he rasped. "I'm scared, Detective." I offered a reassuring nod. "Mr. Gordon, I know you were hurt badly. I need you to tell me exactly what happened between you and Marcus Stone." As he began to speak, voice trembling but firm, I knew we were closing in on the truth. In the shadows of betrayal and financial ruin, the tip from an old friend had illuminated the darkest motive of all. A brother's. Debt so deep, it turned family into the enemy. Chapter 7. Under the Surface. The next morning, I returned to the Harper estate alongside Sergeant Reed and the forensics team. Dawn's pale light revealed the courtyard still dusted with snow, and, I noticed, an absence of footprints near the study window. It seemed the killer had taken care to brush away evidence, but the lab had recovered far more telling clues. "Detective," Reed reported quietly as we stepped into the study. "The scientists just called. We have their preliminary findings." I nodded and surveyed the room one more time. The upended desk, the scattered papers, the single dark footprint I'd photographed yesterday. The window stood slightly ajar. Frost on its sill melted into erratic drips on the floor. "Tell me," I said, "what have they discovered?" Reed consulted his tablet. Time of death, between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. Cause, fracture of the cervical vertebrae consistent with a blow from a solid object. Probably the heavy bronze paperweight found under the desk. It's coated in microscopic particles of blood and skin tissue. They've also matched a thread of dark velvet from the collar latched to Marcus Stone's midnight blue blazer, confirmed by fiber analysis. And here's the kicker. They found 2 additional fragments. one on Oliver's cuff and one on Emma's shawl. My pulse quickened. So the fabric ended up on both Oliver and Emma. That suggests a struggle. Perhaps the killer brushed past her before confronting Oliver. Exactly, Reed agreed. We've sent Emma's shawl and Oliver's cufflink to the lab for DNA swabs. Meanwhile, we retrieved dark garments from both suspects for comparison. I closed my eyes, replaying the timeline. Marcus lurking outside at 11:50, Emma discovering the locked door at 2:30, Victor unreachable after 11. But new threads were emerging. I strode over to the scattered papers on the floor, careful not to disturb the scene. Reed, what about the broken latch? Any signs it was manipulated from outside? He pointed to a close-up photo on his screen. The striker plate on the inside frame is gouged. Looks as if someone forced the latch open with a thin, firm blade. The window was likely pried rather than simply lifted. I crouched by the window, tracing the pattern of frost and the thin wire groove. That means the killer knew exactly where to apply pressure and had the tools to do so. Not a random intruder, but someone prepared. Reed tapped the tablet. DNA tests on trace blood from the paperweight and under Oliver's fingernails should return in a few hours. But the fiber match to Marcus's blazer is already a strong link. Standing, I took a deep breath. Reed, prioritize Emma's. Shawl swabs first. If the DNA there matches Oliver's, it confirms she was in close contact with her husband during the attack. Understandable. But if it also matches Marcus's or an unknown profile, that could redefine our suspect list. He nodded. Understood. I'll have it done by midday. I moved toward the desk. Among the scattered documents was Oliver's phone, face down with the screen cracked. Last night's unanswered call at 11:30. Could that trace to Victor or someone else? I tapped the screen, activating it with a swipe. Reed, have we obtained Oliver's call log and messages? Security's downloading the data now, he replied. Full records should be in our inbox shortly. I nodded and turned back to the window. The courtyard looked peaceful, but beneath this calm veneer lay motives and secrets. Marcus's financial ruin, Victor's profit dispute, Emma's loneliness, and a clandestine late-night call that might reveal whether Oliver's final conversation was with a friend or a foe. A forensic technician approached, holding a sealed evidence bag. Detective, fibers from the shawl and blazer are packaged. The dark thread from the latch has been traced to the same weave pattern. They also recovered a small shard of glass near the sill, not from the window, but from a decorative vase. In the drawing room, I raised an eyebrow. So our killer brushed past the vase en route to the study, possibly cutting themselves and leaving a drop of blood? The technician nodded. Yes, we have a tiny blood smear on a petal. It's being extracted for analysis. I thanked him and stepped back. With fiber matches to Marcus, trace blood and skin on the murder weapon, and now possible glass shard evidence, the physical proof was mounting. Yet, every piece still needed a narrative. Why would Marcus take such a personal risk? Or could someone be framing him? And what of Victor's unanswered 11:30 call? My phone buzzed. It was from the lab. Emma Harper shawl swabs complete. Female DNA only. Matches Oliver Harper. I exhaled. Emma's involvement was consistent with grief and panic, not guilt. The window pried, the locked door, the single footprint, all pointed to a determined assailant, and the velvet fiber confirmed Marcus's midnight proximity. I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Under the surface of every polished facade lay murkier truths, debts unpaid, jealousies unspoken, and rage that overrode sibling bonds. "Read," I said, voice firm. "Prepare a warrant for Marcus Stone's arrest. We have sufficient probable cause. Meanwhile, let's pull Victor's call records and Jasmine Patel's testimony. I want every angle covered." He tapped away on his tablet. As I watched him, the study's quiet gravity weighed on me. Oliver Harper had built an empire of innovation and opulence, but in this frozen room, it was clear that beneath that glittering legacy lay fractures of betrayal and deadly intent. And now we were ready to expose exactly who pulled the trigger. Chapter 8: The Military Connection. I needed one more piece of the puzzle before I signed off on Marcus's arrest. Victor's past kept needling me. His calm assurance felt almost rehearsed, and the broken window latch bore the hallmark of someone who knew how to breach a barrier quickly. So, on a slate-gray afternoon, I crossed Boston Common to the Patriots Club, a mahogany-lined haven for retired officers. Colonel James Andrews, Victor's former commanding officer, had agreed to meet. The lobby smelled of pipe tobacco and lemon polish. A fire crackled in a stone hearth while portraits of Civil War generals stared down. I found the colonel in a leather armchair, uniform blazer immaculate despite his retirement. He rose to greet me, grip firm. "Detective Cole," he said, voice like gravel sliding across granite. "Sit. You've questions about Captain Wells." I took the seat opposite, notebook ready. "Colonel, Victor told me he served 2 tours overseas." "What exactly did he do?" Andrews's pale blue eyes narrowed. "Wells was Special Forces, U.S. Army 10th Group, close quarters entry, alpine insertion, vertical assault. He could scale a 3-story wall in 90 seconds with a 50-pound rook." My mind flashed to the Pride study window, 15 feet off the ground. "That explains a lot," I murmured. "How was his discipline?" "Exceptional in the field, Andrews replied, but he despised bureaucrats. Toward the end, he butted heads with command over profit-driven security contracts. It soured him. He took an honorable discharge 5 years ago. I leaned forward. Did he keep in touch? The colonel nodded. He came by last week, actually. Bought me a scotch, then ranted that his tech celebrity partner was bleeding the restaurant dry. He felt short-changed, said, I built Harbor Light, not the flashy genius. I advised him to negotiate. Temper never was his friend. A buzz vibrated in my pocket. Sergeant Reed's text. Jasmine Patel timeline off. She clocked out 11:15 p.m. Taxi receipt shows Wells hailed cab 11:20, not 11:45. The hole in Victor's alibi widened. I faced Andrews again. Colonel, do you think Victor could turn violent over money? He exhaled slowly. I've seen men kill for less than a broken deal. Victor isn't bloodthirsty, but corner him and pride takes the reins. He pinned me with a solemn stare. If Wells felt cheated, he'd plan an operation, not a brawl. Quiet, precise, quick exit. My phone buzzed a second time. Lab results. Velvet fiber on Oliver's cuff also matches weave of Victor's chef jacket, trace dye unique to Harbor Light uniforms. My pulse kicked. Marcus's blazer wasn't the only source of dark velvet in this case. I thanked the colonel and stepped back into the raw December wind. Snow flurries swirled across the common, blurring Christmas lights into smeared halos. As I walked, Reed called. Maya, we pulled Victor's call log, he said. At 11:23 p.m., he dialed Oliver's personal line from Charlotte Square. 2 minutes 20 seconds. No answer. GPS pings him within a block of the restaurant until 11:24, then patchy until midnight. Exact route unknown. Meaning he had a half hour unaccounted for, the precise window of death. Any update on Marcus's car logs? I asked. His sedan never left his driveway till 2:25 a.m. Matches neighbor's Ring footage, Reed replied. But Marcus's midnight blue blazer? Dry cleaner says he dropped it off yesterday morning, 8 a.m. Too early to be our fiber source. The balance tipped hard. Victor possessed the skills to scale a wall, motive rooted in profit and pride, and a timeline that fit the fracture of Oliver's neck. Marcus still owed money, yes, but his physical evidence was crumbling. Back at the precinct, I spread the new data across my desk. Taxi timestamp, chef jacket fiber match, GPS gaps, colonels, testimony. Hidden beneath Victor's poised surface lay a trained operative accustomed to stealth, one perfectly capable of forcing a latch, delivering a lethal blow, and vanishing into the snow. I lifted the receiver. Reed, draft a warrant for Victor. Wells, and have tactical units on standby. But before we move, I want him rattled. Organize a quiet sting, someplace he'll feel safe, but where we control every door. Reed's voice sharpened. Understood. How do we bait him? Through Emma, I said, memory sparking with an idea. She'll tell Victor a neighbor witnessed someone climbing into the study. She'll say the police artist starts sketching tomorrow. Sugar in the gas tank, Reed muttered. He'll rush to silence the witness. I allowed myself a grim nod. Tonight we set the trap, Sergeant. Victor's military precision will betray him, straight into our hands. Chapter 9. The Sting. Night pressed hard against Hardin Place, a narrow lane 3 blocks from the Harper estate where we'd rented a vacant brown brick row house for our trap. The plan was simple in theory, brutal in practice. Tempt Victor Wells into eliminating a witness who never existed. At 4 that afternoon, Emma agreed to help. On speakerphone, under our guidance, she called Victor, voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. Vic, I'm terrified, she said. Our neighbor, Mr. Fraser, swears he saw someone climbing into Oliver's study window. The police. Artist sketches him tomorrow at 8. Detective Cole says it could break the case. Victor's pause lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, calm as ever, Emma, let me talk to this Mr. Fraser. Maybe he's mistaken. She offered an address, 8 Hardin Place, and apologized that the elderly man insisted on meeting late after his night nurse arrived. Victor promised to drop by around 11. Hook set. By 9:30, the Sting House was staged. We blacked out. The street-facing windows enkilled every interior light except a single glow in the front parlor where Sergeant Reed, disguised as the frail Mr. Fraser, sat reading a large print newspaper. He wore thick spectacles, a gray cardigan, and a battery-powered heart monitor that beeped reassuringly over the silent police radio strapped to his calf. 3 plainclothes officers and I waited in the adjacent sitting room, separated from Reed by a pocket door cracked open 2 inches. I could see Reed's shoulders, hunched and patient. Beyond him, a sheer curtain disguised a broken pane we'd left deliberately ajar, just wide enough for a limber man to creep through. We checked watches. 10:47 p.m. Outside, a light snow had begun to fall, large, lazy flakes that softened every sound. Through the back alley window, I saw our unmarked van, engine idling, its headlights off. The street itself lay silent until 11:06, when the faint hum of an electric scooter drifted on the cold air. Seconds later, a slim silhouette detached from the darkness across the road. Tall, agile, dressed in matte black tactical fleece and gloves, Victor Wells. My pulse quickened. Through the crack, I watched him move with soldierly economy. No wasted motion. He paused under a street lamp, scanned for cameras, then slipped into the narrow garden path. He avoided the front steps, opting instead for the side of the house where the faux broken window waited. Glass creaked softly. A boot tip appeared on the sill, then a gloved hand. Victor flowed through the gap like liquid shadow, landing noiselessly on the carpet. Reed kept his act flawless, clutching his mug of chamomile, muttering about young hoodlums. Victor removed a slim knife from a thigh sheath, blade catching the parlor's single lamp glow. He advanced, voice a low hiss. "Mr. Fraser, I need a word." Reed feigned surprise, squinting. Who's there? Step into the light, young man." Victor did, only enough to loom, knife at shoulder height. "About that story you told Mrs. Harper, seeing someone at a window. You were mistaken." Time compressed. I flicked my mic. "Now." We burst through the pocket door. 2 officers fanned left and right. Another covered the window to block escape. I drew my service weapon but kept it angled low. "Victor Wells! Police!" I barked. "Drop the knife and put your hands on your head." He spun, shock flashing. Across his features, quickly replaced by calculation. The blade wavered, then rose toward Reed's throat. "One step closer and he bleeds," Victor warned, voice steady. "Easy, Vic," I said, keeping eye contact. "You're surrounded. No back exit, no hostages worth dying for. It's over." Snow hissed against the window. Heart monitor beeped. No one breathed. Reed chose that moment to act. He coughed violently, doubling forward as though in distress. The sudden motion distracted Victor a split second, long enough for Officer Hayes to seize his knife wrist in an arm bar. Metal clattered on hardwood. I surged, pinning Victor's opposite arm behind his back. Cuffs clicked. Silence exploded into collective exhale. Reed straightened, winked at me, and slipped off the ridiculous spectacles. "Not bad for a man of 78, he said. Minutes later, Victor sat cuffed on the sofa, sweat beading at his hairline despite the chill. I read him his rights. He stared at the floor. "Why?" I asked quietly. "You built Harbor Light together." He swallowed. "Oliver betrayed me. Promised partnership, then diverted profits to his next launch. I gave him my best years while he dazzled investors and hoarded the credit. When he refused to renegotiate, I snapped." He looked up, eyes burning. "Breaking in was easy. One strike with the paperweight, and it was done. I never meant for Emma to suffer." I recorded every word, the tape deck's wheels turning like slow applause. Outside, Tactical took him to the cruiser. Snowflakes spiraled in the amber streetlight, erasing his footprints almost as quickly as they appeared. Under that soft hush, Hardin Place returned to stillness. Our stage dismantled, our trap complete. But victory felt hollow. Emma Harper would wake tomorrow to learn her husband died, not from an envious stranger or a desperate brother, but from the trusted friend who'd toasted their anniversaries and plated their meals. Under the surface, pride had proved sharper than any blade. I pulled my coat tighter, watching taillights fade into the night, and steeled myself for one final interview. The widow who deserved the truth, however brutal, before this case could finally rest. Chapter 10. Truth and Aftermath. Dawn edged pale gold across Beacon Hill as I guided my unmarked sedan back to the Harper estate. Another Boston night had given way to brittle winter light, leaving iced halos on every wrought iron fence. Victor. Wells was in custody at the London Road precinct, his recorded confession already in the evidence vault, but there was one duty left, one I dreaded more than any arrest. Emma Harper opened the front door before I even rang. She wore an oversized wool sweater and pajama pants, auburn hair loose around drained features. Behind her, the foyer still smelled faintly of cedar and tragedy. "You caught him," she whispered, reading my face. "Yes." I stepped inside, removing my gloves. "May I?" She nodded and led me to the study, now cleared of tape and equipment, though the rug had been sent for forensic cleaning. Oliver's desk sat upright, but deep cracks scored its legs where the fatal impact had toppled it. We settled into twin leather chairs by the cold fireplace. "Victor?" she asked, voice wavering. Took a steady breath. "He confessed an hour ago. Said he confronted Oliver over withheld profits. Things escalated. He pried the window, struck Oliver with the bronze paperweight, then locked the study door to stage an accident." Emma pressed a fist to her lips. Tears gathered but did not fall. "He ate at our table every holiday." My God. I offered a tissue from my coat pocket. "Emma, Victor also said you were never meant to be harmed. He claims guilt overwhelmed him when he learned you might be blamed." She gave a brittle laugh. "Guilt. That didn't stop him from planning another break-in to silence a witness." She shook her head slowly. "How did you know?" "There were tells," I said quietly. The pride latch done with precision, the missing half hour. In his timeline, his special forces training. And finally, the fiber from his chef jacket on Oliver's cuff. I paused. "Marcus is cleared. No evidence places him here during the murder. His blazer thread on the latch was a coincidence. Same fabric family as Harbor Light uniforms. He'll still face civil action for those unpaid loans, but the homicide unit has released him." Relief softened her shoulders. "He'll be grateful to hear that." We sat in silence while morning light advanced across book spines. Outside, the first city sparrows whistled between frost-rimmed branches. When Emma finally spoke, her tone was steadier. What happens next? Victor will be arraigned on first-degree murder, attempted intimidation of a witness, and breaking and entering. Given the confession and forensic proof, the district attorney will likely pursue life without parole. I hesitated. There's another matter. Your share of Harbor Light. With Oliver gone and Victor indicted, ownership reverts entirely to you. You'll need counsel. Emma exhaled, hollow. The restaurant was Oliver's dream, not mine, but maybe some good can come from it. I rose. If you ever need a statement for media, contact our press liaison. Otherwise, take time to breathe. She followed me to the door, stopping beneath a portrait of her and Oliver on their wedding day. Detective, she said, voice barely audible. Thank you for bringing the truth, even if it hurts. It always does, I answered, meeting her gaze. But it beats the dark. Back at the precinct, reporters clustered like winter crows on the sidewalk, microphones poised. I spotted Sam Carter a step ahead of the pack. He tilted his head in silent thanks. I'd kept my promise to feed him the exclusive once the cuffs clicked shut. Inside, Sergeant Reed waited by the coffee machine, neck bandaged where Victor's blade had grazed him. Media's already calling it the Harbor Light homicide, he grumbled, handing me a paper cup. Better than Detective Cole's midnight mess, I teased. His mustache twitched in a grin. Ballistics cleared the bronze paperweight, he added, tapping a file. Blood and prints match Victor only. DA's building the indictment now. I thumbed through the pages, satisfied. Good work, Sergeant. Get some rest. He saluted playfully and limped off toward the elevators. I climbed the stairs to my office, hung my coat, and stared out the window. Children were already trampling fresh snow into slush on the sidewalk, unaware of the lives unraveled overnight. On my desk sat a single evidence bag, Oliver's cracked smartphone. Its lock screen, a photo of him and Emma laughing at a summer barbecue, glowed beneath spider-webbed glass. So much promise in that frozen moment, reduced to evidence of a friend's betrayal. I placed the phone into the transfer box for records and shut the lid. That evening, Sam met me at Deacon Brody's, the pub's stained glass lamps casting warm pools on scarred wood. He slid a scotch across the table. To justice, he toasted. I raised my glass but paused. To justice, I echoed, then set it down. But also to lessons learned. Ambition can be a blade. Wield it wrong, and it cuts the hand that holds it. Sam studied me, then scribbled the quote in his notebook. You know, Detective, you should write your own headlines. Too many commas, I said, finally taking a sip. The burn of peat and smoke anchored me in the moment. Alive, weary, reminded how fragile peace is when pride and desperation ferment beneath civilized veneers. Outside, Boston's skyline glittered, each light a fragile promise against the dark. Cases would come and go, some neat, others jagged. But tonight, at least, the ledger balanced. The truth was out, and the city exhaled another ghost into the record books. I finished my drink, pulled on my coat, and stepped into the cold with the quiet resolve of someone who knows tomorrow's phone could shriek awake the night once more, but who for now had delivered closure and could afford just briefly to breathe. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.